Welcome to Women Don't Do That, where we empower you with inspiration, knowledge, and skills to redefine your boundaries and unleash your potential. I'm Stephanie Minton, founder and CEO of Beacon North Strategies and your guide. Small town girl turned CEO while navigating career, motherhood, ADHD, and chronic migraines. Our conversations range from interviews with visionary women to solo episodes filled with actionable insights. We are your hub for turning what ifs into let's go. Are you ready to redefine your possible? Let's get started. Welcome to today's episode of Women Don't Do That. We are excited to have Dr. Peggy Shannon, president of NSCAD University, with us. Dr. Shannon shares her inspirational journey to become a leader in academia, having worked all over the world in various prestigious institutions. With a background in both teaching and the arts, she brings a unique perspective on career development and leadership. We dive into her experience, insights on career growth, and advice for women aspiring to be leaders. Whether you're looking to advance your career or seeking inspiration, this episode is filled with valuable takeaways. Tune in and be inspired by Dr. Shannon's story and wisdom. Welcome, Peggy.
Thanks, Stephanie.
I'm so excited that you're here and doing this with me. We've been chatting about it on and off, it feels like, for a while.
I look forward to our conversation. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. I want to start by having the viewers get to know you a little bit better. Can you share what motivates you to live your best life?
Yes, I would say it was very much how I was raised. So I was raised to think about community, think about a team, think about I live a half glass full kind of life. And I'm grateful. I really am grateful each and every day. And that does help me live my best life. I'm not unhappy. I feel like if there are obstacles in the way of what I'm trying to get or to go, try to figure out how to get through them. So I would say, and I'm healthy. I'm very healthy. So I think I feel very fortunate.
I love that perspective. I actually want to pause on that for a second. For people who maybe don't have that perspective, what advice would you give to help them think through that type of approach to life?
Well, it's a really good question. I think every day there's a part of me that also is existential. What I mean by that is, I do think we are capable of creating our own destiny. I do believe we are capable of, we're responsible for how we live our lives every day. So I guess my advice would be, it's easy to focus on things that aren't going well. It's easy to commiserate and complain, and those things are valuable. I think they're really valuable, actually. But it's equally important to focus on what you do have and not what you don't, but what you do have, whether it's good health or a loving partner or children that you love being with, whatever it is that you love, the ability to do the things that bring you pleasure. I just focus on those things. And when I leave work, I really try to turn it off. And I really try to focus on my life outside of work. I really do, intentionally.
When you talk about turning it off, what are some of the things that help you do that?
Well, I have a wonderful spouse, so lots of conversations there. I love to cook. So my family, when my kids are in town, my husband is attached to a university in the States, so we actually go back and forth quite a bit. So when we're all together, which we are actually right now, celebrating Father's Day, and his birthday was yesterday, we take turns cooking and we laugh a lot. We joke around a lot.
So finding things that you love outside of work sounds like really helps you kind of close it off a bit.
I do. Yes, exactly. Family. It's really important to me.
When you talk about what does life look like for you right now? Are you in the office full time? You talked about having a family. What does it look like?
Well, being a president of a small art and design university is very time consuming. And um, I'll focus on where we're at now, not where we've come from, because I think that's important because I can
Mhm.
only take responsibility for where we're at today. So I do think it's really important that people see me at work. I walk around, I have conversations with people. I'm not just sitting in an office. So we have three campuses, and I definitely try to find my way to the three campuses on a fairly regular basis. Um, I not so much this year because we had other things we had to accomplish, but in my first year, I actually went and observed some classes and
Mhm.
went to faculty members' homes for potlucks. And, I'm really trying to be part of the community. I
Mhm.
have president with the pizza with the president opportunities for students to come and meet with me and talk and share their ideas for what they would like to see. So I'm very visible. That said, we're also in the quiet phases of a very large capital campaign. So
Mhm.
I'm also, when I'm not here, I'm on the road with our advancement director, meeting with alumni, donors, supporters, potential
Mhm.
donors, that sort of thing.
And you travel a lot for work. So
I do.
how do you do that and also try to have some balance in your life or not be exhausted? I think a lot of people find it really tiring. What advice do you have for other people who do that and are just really tired?
When it's possible, it's not always possible, but when it's possible, fly in and arrive late afternoon, early
Mm.
evening, and don't have any engagements on that night. Just fly in, get a good night's rest, and start the next day with the meetings and the meals and whatever you're going to do. That actually saves me a lot. And also now, because we're doing a lot of travel outside of the country, well, there was a time, Stephanie, where I would try, I would be on a red eye and get there in the morning. I don't do that anymore. I just don't. So
Mhm.
even if I have to have a long layover somewhere, I try to arrive at some point in the evening, get a good night's sleep, and then start the next day. That's all. I mean, I don't know really what more to say.
Building in some buffer time.
Yeah.
That's really wise. I think that's really wise. And
Mhm.
it's one of those things where maybe for somebody who's even younger than me that has more energy for that, it's still good practice because it will
Mhm.
keep that balance and keep you healthy and
Yes.
protect you from burnout. So I think that's
It
really good.
It does because there's no point. If you're going to travel and you're burned out, then you're not doing anybody any favors at
Mhm.
all.
Especially if you give everything you have while you're on the
Right.
road. And then if you do have a family, that's you're
Right.
really going to have some impacts on that if you're not mindful. I say that as someone whose spouse has traveled most of his career, that balance is really important
Right.
and you have to work at it. It's not
You
always
do.
easy.
You do. You absolutely do. I also have a secret weapon, which is feels very unfair to even mention this, but I will. My daughter is just finishing up her license to be a registered massage therapist. So
Ooh,
when I come back, I know. When I
yeah,
come back, she'll work on me,
nice.
which
I
is
keep saying
really
to
nice.
my kids don't like blood, but I keep saying to some of my nieces and nephews, I'm like, we need a doctor, we need a dentist, like all these professions that we need. So
Yes,
now I'll
please.
have to figure out who can be a massage therapist.
I'm telling you right now, it's a lifesaver. It's
That's
really good.
amazing. Can you
Yeah.
tell us more about NASCAD? Like, what is
Sure.
NASCAD? What do you do? Talk to me about
Sure.
that.
Nova Scotia College of Art and Design University is certainly one of the oldest art and design universities in North America. And it's one of the smallest, it's one of four in Canada. And we are located in the Atlantic region of Canada, but we're known much more far reaching than just the Atlantic Canada region.
Mm-hmm.
NASCAD has an interesting history and an equally interesting vision for its future. We are small, but we think big. We are risk takers in our own artistic way, not financial risk takers, but I see that the students, the faculty, the staff, the history, the future, there are bold aspirations, right? So that is a NASCAD thing, I would say. We have a long history of graduating some incredible artists and designers, just incredible people. Really, well, I'll just say that on my very first day at NASCAD as the president, I noticed this framed, what looked like a degree or diploma or something, just sitting on the floor right outside my office. And I picked it up, and it was the honorary degree for Andy Warhol that we had given to Andy Warhol. I guess he just didn't take it with him. But I mean, we have a sort of artistic history with connecting with people who are change makers, really, in art and design. So there's a scrappiness to us, a forward thinkingness to us. I'm making up words, but you know what I mean?
Yes.
And my job is really to make sure everybody feels supported, that students who want to be here and deserve to be here can be here. Faculty can do the research they want. They can do the art making and design that they want, that sort of thing. That's my job. Make sure.
My sister-in-law went there, which you know,
Oh,
Karen,
right.
and I got to visit the institution too, which was really exciting. And even just having gone to a more traditional, you know,
Yeah,
Carleton or Laurier, it was so interesting to me. And seeing all the different types of things that you could take at a school at NASCAD and the
yeah,
breadth of education that she got was really interesting to me and very eye-opening. When you look at the future of the arts, I think a lot of people think about the arts in a really tiny box, right? They think about drawing or painting,
right,
but there's
right,
so much more than that. Most of them will
right.
be business owners. They have impacts on things like manufacturing. Can you speak a little bit about what you're excited about in the future of the arts?
Sure. There used to be a time when, hundreds of years ago, when medicine sort of framed how we thought about the world. Then
Mm-hmm.
there was a time when astrology framed how we thought about the world. Then there was a time, and we're kind of still in it, where technology frames how we think about the world.
Yeah.
But I believe we are also very much in a time where creativity frames who we are, how we think, where we're going. And
Mm,
that's industry, that's design, that's art making, that's
mm.
fashion, that's it is technology, of
Yes.
course, because artists are now using technologies in new ways. Um, our time is like right now.
Right.
So I think we are framing the future of the world, and we are connecting the world. We all lived through the pandemic, but we've all learned from that too. And we
Yes.
are globally connected, and we're
Mm,
making things in ways that we never did before. So
mm.
it's a great time to be an artist. It is not a small box, it is a global box, I would
Right.
say. It's not even a box, it's just an opportunity to express ourselves in new and different ways.
I love that. And I know for myself, when I think about the things that excite me about my work, it, it often has an element of creativity to it.
Right.
And when I think about when I sit down and I try to think about my business and like what makes me different or stand out, I love applying creativity, creative ideas, creative
Right.
concepts to traditional work.
Right.
So I'll often do events that are very different. I remember one time I took kids to Parliament Hill for an event,
Oh,
and
wow.
instead
Yeah.
of, you know, the MPs just asking questions from the kids, because
Mm.
it was really about youth empowerment, I had the MPs interview the kids about their ideas.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Right.
That's
And so it's
awesome.
like flipping the script and doing things differently. And I find personally, and this is maybe some advice for the listeners, bringing your creativity and your ideas that make you stand out or make your business stand
Mhm.
out or the company you work for is really what sets you
Definitely.
apart. And right
Oh,
in a world where there are many, and there are so many lobbyists, that creativity is
right,
part of what makes me different.
right.
And so I love how we can bring that into our lives and our work.
I love that. And I agree with you 100%. I Here's an interesting dichotomy, if you will, of me. So the mother side of me, of course, had expectations of what my kids would grow up to be.
Hmm.
My son has a history degree from what was then Ryerson, now is TMU. And I think I thought he would maybe go down an academic path. And one day he said, "No, I'm not going to do that. I've decided to be a content creator on YouTube." This was, and I'm like, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
What is that? And what about your pension? And what about health insurance and these kind of things? And he's like, "Mom, please just trust me on this." So I can't even imagine sometimes what our younger generations are going to do and launch and
Hmm.
be. But it's
It's
my
true.
job to, like you, to bring their voice out and let them do it and be
Right.
successful.
I love that. It's so true when I think about that as a mom, because I like to think about that
Yeah.
too. And my oldest is 13,
Yeah.
so she's still got a bit to go, but it's not actually that long to
No.
right till she's making those
Right.
decisions. And just imagining, part of me is like maybe the job that she'll end up having doesn't even exist yet. And how, as parents,
Right.
we give them the supports
Right.
to become adults, and yet at the same time we have to hold what we're giving to them loosely.
Right. You're so right. That's so beautifully stated. And that's right. And it's really hard.
It's very hard. Very hard, especially because all you know is what you went through,
Is what
right?
you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think, I don't know, I'd be curious your thoughts on this, Peggy. When I think about, maybe for listeners who don't really feel creative or are having a hard time finding their creativity, for me personally, I think my creativity comes from knowledge. So I consume a lot of information. I consume a lot of TikTok. I really like TikTok.
Mm.
I listen to a ton of podcasts, but I also like to listen to things
Mm.
and learn things that are outside of my box. So
Right.
I'm a lobbyist. I own a business, but I listen to a lot of stuff about marketing and branding.
Yes.
And then I'm able to pull that into what I'm doing, which layers in that creativity. So, what would you say to people from your perspective who want to bring in more creativity or having a hard time accessing it?
Well, I'm going to give you an example of somebody I learned from
Mm-hmm.
many years ago in another life. I was an associate vice provost at the University of California, Davis. Yes, I was teaching theater, and we'll circle back around to that.
Mm-hmm.
But one of my jobs was to work with all of the deans, and the University of California is a really science, medicine, agriculture sort of driven system. And in one of my meetings with the dean of veterinary science, of all things, right? I asked him, how, "You're the number one veterinary school in the world. How did that happen?" And he said, "I spend 50% of my time daydreaming." And I thought I had not actually heard him correctly. So I'm like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I sit in my office or I sit at home and I daydream about the future and what it might look like in terms of animals and the planet and how we can care for the planet and it was incredible." And so now I realize if I overwork myself, my creativity goes down.
Yeah.
If I find the right balance, I can still think, dream, and be creative, if this makes sense to you. Yeah.
Um, oh, I totally agree. It's very hard to do, but I agree. And I've heard really big thought leaders like Oprah and others. First of
Right.
all, they read a lot, but
They
they
read.
also schedule time,
Yeah.
right? Where they're not booked 24/7, where they
Right.
can do that. And I remember, I forget if it was the Next Gen event that my company put on this year, or if it was, I think it was the Next Gen event, came to
Okay.
me working out at the gym. right? You're thinking about other things. You've created
Exactly.
some headspace, and
Exactly.
it's like on the walk, at the gym, in the bathtub. Like those are the moments,
Exactly right.
right? And it's very hard to do, and it's hard to imagine, oh, I'm going to take a, I mean, I'm very bad at this, but like take a walk in the middle of my workday. But that
Right.
is where some of that
Right.
magic happens.
Right.
Very interesting.
Hmm.
Can you walk us through, a university president is a very, very big job.
Yeah.
How did you get here? Where did you kind of start, and what got you to where you are today?
Well, quickly, I live this sort of dual life. I live as an academic, and I have, degrees, many degrees. But I also live as a theater artist, and I've been a practicing theater director. I've run large professional theaters in the United States. I've directed plays and produced things all over the world. So
Mm,
I have a producer director side that's been active for almost 30 years.
right.
Academic side, I don't know how I knew this, but I figured out perhaps 20 years, maybe, yes, about 20 years ago, that I was good at administration and good with teams of people. That's what theater directors do. We take teams of people and we create. So I started as a chair of a program, a director of a school, then, moved into, I worked my way up. I've been a
Mm,
dean, I've been an associate vice provost, and now I'm a president. And I just kept seeing what the next level was and what
mhm,
skill set I would need and making sure I got experience. And then I
mhm,
would try for the next level. So
mhm. I
that's
think that's
that's kind of
really,
how I did it.
I think it's really important, Peggy, because I think a lot of people look at leaders, let's say you're mid 20s, early 30s, and they think, oh, like Peggy's life is so busy. She's doing all these things. She's so smart. I could never do that. And
Oh,
I love for people to break it down and see, like, when you look
right.
at your career, all the
Right.
steps that you had to take to get there, that by the time you're there, you have the skill sets and you are
Yes.
ready.
Yes, that's right. You're absolutely right.
I think it's an important part of the story. Can you talk about it and pack a little bit? And maybe this is more just like of particular interest to me, but how having that background in theater has
Yes.
impacted your career, and the value that it brings to you as a university president.
Right. So I've worked for decades as a theater director, but
Hmm.
also I've run as an artistic director large professional theaters in the United States, and I've worked as a producer
Hmm.
in both the American would be the equivalent, I guess, of CBC, but National Public Radio. I directed a
Mm,
lot of plays for the radio, for National Public Radio.
I
But,
love
but
that.
yeah, but I've also, so as a director, I'm working with a team of people. I'm taking a script or commissioning a script, and I'm bringing that to life, three-dimensional life with the intention of, on some level, entertaining an audience.
Hmm.
Somebody who runs a theater as an artistic director does everything a university president does, everything.
Hmm.
Fundraising, lobbying,
Hmm.
hiring, uh, managing, strategizing, creating strat plan, all the things you need to do as an
Hmm.
academic administrator, you actually are doing if you're running a large nonprofit, uh,
Yes.
in my case, theater.
Hmm.
And uh, I don't know. I like being in an artistic environment, but I
Mm,
love being in an administrative role. I just love
right.
it. It works for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I wanted to add, you and I worked together on advocacy, and
Mhm.
when you are in a room and you're telling stories and you're meeting with people,
Mm.
you're so, you're like electric.
Oh,
People are
oh,
drawn to you. You make it interesting, you make it compelling. You have this like personality, I think, that people uh admire, appreciate, want to be friends with. And so
Wow.
I can see, all of those years of work and training also coming through on that side as well.
That's so kind of you to
You're really
say
good with
that.
people.
Well, you know what I'm able to tell the story of
Yeah.
what it is an institution or an organization is doing and what's the narrative? Where are we going? Why?
Yes.
Why?
But
Why?
it's the authenticity that you bring to it
Yeah,
too. You really believe in it
I
and
do.
like personally, and I think people can tell the difference
Yeah.
when people are telling their stories that way. I don't know, Peggy, if you would know this about me. Well, you won't, but I did Royal Conservatory. So I have my grade 8 in music, in singing.
Wow.
Yeah, classical. So I don't do as much of it like since I've
Wow.
had kids.
Yes.
I did some theater in high school, but yes, mostly singing. And I always find it
Wow.
really interesting how when I do presentations and speak to people, how
Hmm.
those skill sets transfer.
Right.
I did a presentation last fall for a group of people. I think it was 500 people. People said like, "Weren't you nervous?" I'm like, "I've sang in front of this many people." Like, no. And I've been doing that since I was
Wow.
probably 7, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
I grew up in a church and then I had the music.
Exactly.
So like
Exactly.
you build, it's so interesting to me how different things you've done in your life, whether it's sport or music
Right.
or art, can
Right.
translate into other skill sets.
Were you singing in a solo or in a choir or both?
Mostly solo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That tells me a lot, so much about you. Your
Uh-huh.
speaking voice is so strong and melodic
Yeah.
and
It's also very interesting because I can pick up if I practice
mm,
on other languages, not in terms of all of a sudden speaking them or reading them, but I
right,
because you sing in different languages.
right, right.
So if if I practice and do French and then I speak to an audience in French, sometimes they don't know that I'm not bilingual because
Wow.
I'm able to kind of
Right.
mask it, I guess, or like practice it well enough.
I
And
get it.
yes, that's very
Mhm.
interesting. So I'll say to people, I can speak, but don't ask me any questions.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I always find that
Totally
very, very
understand.
interesting.
I
Mhm.
totally understand that.
Yes. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
that's great. It's also fun to think that, things that you invested so much time in still have impacts in your life in other ways and how you can see it
I know. I
thing.
know. Hmm. That's right. That is right.
Have you faced, as you think about your career path and how you
Mm.
got to where you are today, any barriers that you've overcome or advice you have for people when things like that happen to them?
Well, sure. I started, uh, I grew up at a time when women were expected to get married and have children and not
Yes,
necessarily have careers.
right?
And also at a time there were very few female theater directors, very few, and certainly even fewer women serving as artistic directors of large professional companies.
Right.
So, because I had two brothers and a sister, I think my parents put a lot of focus on my brothers, their
Mm-hmm.
career path.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, it really helped me because they just, I mean, they saw me, they cared about me, but there was no pressure on me to be
Mm-hmm.
anything other than a
Mm-hmm.
wife and a mother, learn to sew, learn to cook, sorts of things.
Yeah.
I cannot to this day sew, but I am a very good cook. But what it did was it freed me to go into a field where I had never even seen a professional play when I was growing up. It just, like you, I had the church and had choir and had little, opportunities to perform. But I figured out that I really didn't want to be an actor. I loved the idea of creating, but three-dimensionally.
Mm-hmm.
So I did go into a field where there were very few people, and I had very few women. And I had some crazy things said to me, like, what's it feel like to be a woman director? And I would find myself saying ridiculous things like, well, I don't actually know what it feels like to be a male director, so I have no way to compare that.
Right.
Or, it's hard to take direction from a girl. I actually did have that said to me. It's just,
Oh,
you just sort of put blinders on and just
yes,
get on with the work. And then at a certain point in time, I looked around and there were a lot of women doing it.
right.
And that was true for university administration as well. There was a time when there were only men, and then there
Yes.
was a time when there were some women and more men, and then it was a lot of women and men. And I think now we just look for people with the right skill sets and,
Hmm.
who bring value to the work.
Hmm.
But it's been interesting
Hmm.
for
I
sure.
think when you go through those things, I know for me personally in my career, it can feel really challenging and really hard when you're going through them. And then
Mm,
when I look back, I think I have such thick skin professionally.
right.
And so, in some ways, I'm thankful, as
Right.
hard as it was,
Mm,
because I'm a different kind of leader and I'm able to handle difficult people and
mhm.
scenarios in a different way than I would have, even though it was very hard to walk through it.
I can see that in you. I really can. You're strong, but it's an interesting balance. You're strong, you're clear, you're very direct, but you also can read the room. And I think that's really important in a leadership role. You need to be able to read your audience and understand what they want from you.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
I see you are able to do that. It's really great.
Oh, thanks, Peggy. Yes, I
Hmm.
was thinking about that this morning that I think one of the, as hard it is as it is, and I'm somebody who has ADHD, so it can be very hard for me. But
Uh,
one of the most important skill sets you can have, I think, as a professional is listening,
hmm hmm
listening and watching, I guess.
hmm
But
Agreed.
you have been leading a lot of different change at NASCAD. What
Yes.
advice do you have for leaders who are working through managing or leading change?
Sure. That is a really great question. And I will share with your listeners what was suggested to me. Um, in Canada, and I do think this is a really important Canadian trait. I really do. Process is as important as the change itself. So, what do I mean? I mean, people have opinions, they want to be heard, they want to talk through it. And so, leading change at NASCAD,
Mm,
where I walked into an environment that was pretty tough, actually, 2 years ago, it was a very different environment.
mm,
There was a lot of animosity, hostility. People were not listening to each other. So I spent a year listening, really listening.
mm,
We
mm,
had a strategic plan committee, but we spent a lot of time on really basic things like what does it mean? I had people say to me, don't use these two words, strategic or plan. We don't like them. Literally.
yeah.
So I said, okay, what do you want me to say? Well, something else that suggests the future, but not strategic and not plan. It's too businessy. So we ended up with envisioning our future committee and the seriously creative plan for the strat plan. But that took time. We had to all weigh in on ideas and thoughts and words and what things mean. So I would say if you're managing or leading change in an environment that has not really had good leadership around change, take your time, listen, get the right people at the table. Uh, and if you bring them to the table, you need to feed them, you need to listen to them, and you need to
Mm,
engage them. They can't just sit at the table. They need to
mhm.
really be
It
present,
it's
you
so
know?
interesting as I hear you talk about this. It makes me think so much about marriages and how
Totally. Oh,
listening
totally.
and communication are the basis, and how
Totally.
change and professionalism is about communication and listening,
Totally.
right?
There's no shortcut, you know. There's
Yeah.
just no way around it. You really have to commit to go through it and go through it as a group if you're managing change.
Did you read the book? There's some kind of book that talks about like the first 100 days in a leadership role and how you shouldn't make a bunch of changes.
Yeah, I did read that a long time ago, and I don't even remember the name of the book. I know
Yeah.
exactly the one you're talking about, but I have another one that's sort of my my go-to Bible book. Um,
Okay.
I'll
Well,
just say what that is or no.
yeah, sure.
All I really need to know, I learned in kindergarten. I don't know if you've read that book or you're aware of that book,
Oh,
but that's the book,
that sounds
really.
great.
Well, yeah, because these are the most basic principles of how to be a good citizen in a playground when you're
Mhm.
4 or 5 years old. Because if you can kind of get a hold of that and take those same
Mm.
skills as you mature,
Right,
then you're really, yeah, don't make a lot of change in the first 100 days. People will wig
right.
out. Yes,
Yes, yeah.
it's a given.
Yes, yes. How, so the flip side is that a lot of our listeners maybe aren't in leadership roles and
Right.
maybe they're the employees or and change for some people is just so stressful. Just the idea of it, let alone it happening to them or being engaged in them. How can we support them, or what advice do you have for them as they're walking through these types of experiences where they're going through a lot of change, especially at work?
It's a really good question. And there is no one right answer. I
Mm,
mean, that's just the truth.
yeah.
Um, I I would say to somebody who's trying to figure out a way to navigate through change, who do you report into?
Mm,
And start there. Start, and if you don't have a good relationship with that person, maybe there's a coworker, but start somewhere. Start somewhere where you can actually not whine about work, but talk about work. Talk about
mhm,
what's happening, what you would like to see happen, what
mhm,
you're worried about. Talk about the things that are really basic and important to you.
mhm,
And once you find one person, maybe there's another person, and start to build a little network. And then if you are comfortable enough, find a way, and this is happening here almost daily, actually at NASCAD. People are finding their way to my office to say, I heard you're doing the da 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 da. I have thoughts on it. May I share those thoughts with you?
mhm.
Then, you know, I do let them share those thoughts.
Yeah,
So start somewhere, I guess is my advice.
right.
Start somewhere
Yeah.
and start to communicate what you're worried about, what you'd like
Mhm,
to see, what would make your life better.
mhm. And that's where I think a lot of that also comes down to leadership, right? Like for the leaders listening, that you
Mhm.
create the space for those types of conversations with your staff. Like I would want my staff to be able to feel like they can also just come and talk to me about that directly. But
Right,
it's you as a leader that creates that culture in that space
right.
that can really help walk through change.
There's another thing I'm going to say, which may not be very popular, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is just because you find yourself in a job, it may not be the right job for you,
Mhm,
actually.
mhm.
It may not be.
Yeah,
And that's okay too. And if you are somebody who, is starting the career path and you need to work and you need to pay your rent and you have bills, we all get it. We've all been
right.
there. But start looking to be the person or in the job that you want to be,
Mhm,
and use the time for the job that you're in that maybe is not the right job to develop the skills that will help you get to the next one. I'm a big believer in that.
Peggy, I think that's such good advice because I think sometimes we forget that we really do, and you talked about this at the beginning, have so much career or so much control, even though it feels like you don't, you have
Yeah,
control of your
you
career
do.
path, your skill sets, your career
Right.
growth. And I'm a person who every couple of years changed jobs, and that served me really well. And I
Yes.
still have great relationships with the people I've worked with. And
Yes.
so, yeah, you really can navigate that. What advice, we've talked about this a little bit, but would you give to a woman who maybe has leadership skills, but the idea of being in a leadership role is so daunting or
Yeah.
scary to them?
I have advice. Find a mentor as soon as
Mhm,
possible.
mhm.
And it doesn't even have to be in your own field. Find a
Yes,
woman, find a woman who's in a
yes.
leadership position who, and just make it really, ask them formally and politely. I see what you're doing. I would learn a lot from you. Would you consider mentorship?
Hmm.
Meet once a week, once a month, whatever, and just share
Yeah,
advice with me. I've
yeah.
always had mentors, and I think it's important.
Yes, I would agree. And I think what I would add to that is to be bold, like you said, and to ask. Because I think a lot of people say, well, how do you find them? You literally find
Yes.
someone you admire, you ask them for coffee. Like that's the first step.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I personally find that because so many of us have mentors, have had mentors and people invest in us, that we're
Right.
quite happy to do that for other people.
I agree. Oh my gosh, I so agree with you.
Mhm.
100%. Yes.
Yeah. And so it feels scary, but they want to. They maybe you
Yes.
don't have a lot of time, so maybe it's once a month or every couple
Yeah.
months, but
Whenever.
right. And you can also have multiple mentors
Yes.
or mentors for different things, right? You could have one for marriage and one for work or one, right? Like
100%.
there's different,
Yes.
right? So you can build that network. Um, Looking forward, what what imprint do you hope to leave on NASCAD?
I would like to believe that NASCAD is at a really incredibly special moment in time in its trajectory. And I would like to believe that my imprint will be righting the ship and
Mm,
setting it sailing into the future of what it is meant to be. In the 1970s here at NASCAD, Gary Neal Kennedy was a very pivotal figure, a president. Everybody talks about this sort of impact on the contemporary art scene and Gary's
mm,
contribution. I'd like to believe not Peggy Shannon, but this moment
mm,
that the people who are here and coming together are dreaming of a future, right?
mhm,
That this is a moment in time where things are turning around and moving. We're consolidating our campus on the waterfront. Um, we're growing the size of the institution intentionally,
mhm,
thinking in new, innovative ways around how we earn our money, all kinds of things. And yet we're not sacrificing what it means to be an artist or a designer.
mhm, mhm,
So I guess that would be my hope, that it's a time where people are enjoying each other, coming
mhm.
together, dreaming big.
Yes, I love that. That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Let's close it off with some rapid fire question. Can you share a rule you've broken that turned out to be a great decision?
Sure. My family, I grew up in a small family business, very small. My dad was an upholsterer and had an upholstery supply store. And his dream, I think, for me was to spend my life working in that store. Obviously, that didn't happen.
Right. Yes, so you broke those rules.
I broke that rule. And I I didn't stay in one job my whole life, which is,
Mhm.
I think, was the expectation, and I've never looked back.
Amazing. Who's a woman who continually inspires you?
Okay, I'm going to do three very quickly.
Sure.
Shireen Ebadi, Nobel Peace Prize winner. She is an Iranian lawyer, activist for women's rights, and she's had to live outside of Iran for years. But she's a
Mm,
huge inspiration to me, and I had the opportunity to meet her some years back. Another woman that totally inspires me, she's dead now, but for years, was Ruth Bader Ginsburg on,
mm,
yeah, Americans. I mean, that woman was amazing, and
mhm,
her legacy will be felt for years. And then finally, just in my own little personal world, a woman named Valerie Colgan, who is currently 88 years old, going strong. And she is an acting teacher that I had when I trained as an actor in London. And she still is training, she's still training
mhm.
actors
Wow,
at
that's
88.
amazing.
I mean, yeah,
That's amazing. Maybe this is the same, but maybe it's a different than what you already mentioned. What's one book that significantly impacted your wisdom or perspective?
that's it. Everything I needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten. And it was so basic. I mean, I'm a reader with a PhD. I had to read a ton of really serious books, and I read leadership books. I read novels. I read all the time. But the one that really just got me because it was so simple and so basic and so accurate was that one.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for doing this, Peggy.
Of course. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us on Women Don't Do That. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating or review. Connect with us on Instagram at Women Don't Do That and visit our website www.womendon'tdothat.com for more details. Join our Patreon to support our work. Find all of the links in the show notes. Remember, you have the power to transform your what ifs into let's go. Together, let's redefine your possible. Until next time.